All right, well, thank you for having me at the Career Resource Center. Appreciate being asked to come talk about finding your purpose and the hero's journey. My name is Scott MacMillan. I'm a life coach and author, and we're going to be talking about using the hero's journey to find your purpose. So, a little bit about my story. This was back in 2002. I remember I was in the shower one morning, and I was trying to let the really, really hot water just penetrate my sore back muscles. I'd had a really bad year. I had tons of stomach pain, lots of back pain, kind of just took me out. I hardly could work and so on. And I remember sitting in the shower that morning, and I remember hearing this voice saying, "This is not the way to live life. You must be doing something wrong." And I'm really hearing this voice. I'm like, okay. And it wasn't really like this God booming voice, but it was just this thought that just penetrated my brain that I needed to look inside for the answers. And I was trying to find through doctors and trying to find the answer outside, and I needed to do something different in my life because the pain was just unbearable and it was just taking me out. So now on the outside, things looked pretty good. I had a nice house, I had wife, a couple of kids, a good corporate job, but I was miserable. My health was clearly failing, my marriage was failing, my job was just really stagnant and just unfulfilling. And I had no vision, I had no passion, I had no purpose. And I was just this sort of rudderless ship just bouncing around in the ocean. So by this time, it was about a year before I had that sort of calling in the shower, and I tried all sorts of doctors. I tried surgeons, and I did physical therapy, and I did a chiropractic, and you name it, I had tried it, and I was exhausted, I was in chronic pain, and I just couldn't figure out why. And so this calling in the shower, I realized that it'd be 15 years later when I kind of realized that was my calling to my first hero's journey. Now, I didn't know it was at the time. It took me 15 years to kind of understand that I was on my journey and that was my calling, but I refused the call for 15 years, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So as I was trying to figure out my life and figure out what was going on, I ran into this guy named Joseph Campbell in the hero's journey. And Joseph Campbell was an American mythologist back in the, I think, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And he studied all the myths, the great myths of the world and stories, and he realized that there's one basic story theme that every story has. And it's the story of the hero, that we follow through in the story through these stages of the journey. And so he created this sort of 12 stages of the hero's journey. And the first stage is this ordinary world. Back up to the ordinary world. That's where the hero is. They don't know they're a hero yet, right? It's where the story begins, and they're just living their normal life. Then they have this call to adventure. That's where they either have this knowing or this calling, there's more for them out there in life, or something catastrophic happens and they are pushed out into their unknown world. So, a divorce, a job loss, a bankruptcy, something big, and now you're out there. It's pushed you out there. But we're afraid, right? We don't want to change, or we don't understand it, and so we refuse the call. I refused the call for 15 years before I understood that I needed to step out of my comfort zone. And along the way, you meet some mentors. They give you some courage, they give you some ideas, and then finally you cross the threshold, and now that's when you're in your unknown world, you're taking your journey, and you're going to face your fears, and you're going to learn how to be a hero so you can save the day at the end. So I'll talk a lot about the parallels, because all movies that you've ever seen are based on this hero's journey, and it's easy to look at the movies and kind of recognize yourself in these different stages. So, of course, we're not out slaying dragons, right? But we've got our own dragons inside that we've got to face, and that's what this whole metaphor is about. So, when I looked at that and I kind of understood that, I had this sort of epiphany. I'm like, well, I'm like those guys. I'm like the heroes up there. And I decided to put my life into 12 stages. I mean, I literally said, okay, where was I when I was in my ordinary world? What was I doing? What was I doing when I got the call to adventure? And I put my life into all these 12 stages, and I realized I understood myself better than I'd ever have before. And I realized that we're all heroes, right? We're all heroes of our own story. And we all do the same thing. We refuse the call, and like I did for 15 years. How you doing? And we go on our journeys and we face our fears and we learn. So why is taking your hero's journey important for your purpose? Well, the essence of the hero's journey is about facing your fears, learning about yourself, and having a holistic view so that you can understand what your purpose might be. But the first thing you have to do before you kind of go find your purpose is figure out who you are, really. And understand that your life has made you who you are today. And life is segmented in all sorts of events, right? Kind of just like they've done in the 12 stages. Some are good, some are bad. We've learned sometimes we were heroes, right? Sometimes we refused the call and we didn't make it. And when you put this all together, it gives you the courage to really look forward and say, all right, I want to get to this point, my purpose. But nobody likes change. So that's the key thing. It's like most of us get stuck somewhere in the middle of the journey because we're afraid, we don't know. A lot of us maybe have never even thought about finding our purpose or that you're on this journey. The other reason is, I love this quote by Stephen Covey. It's like, you never want to get to the end of your life and realize that you've been climbing the wrong ladder and it's up against the wrong wall. And so, that's a key thing. So this is a really good time to take a pause and make sure that your ladder is up against the right wall. So, how do we find our purpose? Well, Joseph Campbell talks about finding your bliss in the hero's journey. Now, your bliss is that calling to your soul. It's that thing that you just can't do enough of, and when you're doing it, you just totally lose track of time. And if you follow your bliss, that's what Joseph Campbell says. If you follow that sort of what excites you, what your passion is, that will lead you to your purpose. Now, it doesn't have to be a profession. Now, it's cool if it is. It's really rich and rewarding if it is, but that's not the point of this. The point is that you've got to have something you can get up every morning for and look forward to, right? You've got to have that you got to have that passion, and it usually has something to do with helping other people. So, as I was thinking about this and kind of going through my journey and thinking about what my bliss was, I realized that I just had to get out of my head and go volunteer. So I started volunteering for nonprofits. And does anybody know Starfish Project here? Yeah. I met Johnny, started talking with her, started getting involved in all sorts of things, going down to soup kitchens and so on. That just kind of got me out of my head. It just kind of opened up my heart, and I realized that I really like to write, and I was doing a lot of journaling at the time. And that's when this book just sort of was rolling around in my head, and then it just kind of came out. When it was ready, it just flowed. And during that time of writing it, I realized that I wanted to be a life coach. I got my certification, became a life coach. So before we move on, just be curious to know, does anybody know their life purpose now? Does anybody sort of think they got that figured? Care to share?
Oh, no problem. Yeah, after a lot of years of being an engineer, I know that I'm an evangelist. I'm supposed to be, I'm writing and speaking about the kingdom of God.
Nice. Nice. How long did it take you to find it, to figure that out?
Oh, wow. God spoke to my heart decades ago.
Okay.
But how to get from point A to point B?
Right. So that's refusal of the call.
I'm still on that journey.
That's refusal of the call, and you're middle of the journey. In fact, interesting, because I had a similar sort of calling, kind of a knowing that there was more out there I didn't really know, and it'd be like 15 years, like I said, before I kind of tried, where I think I realized that. And a lot of things happened, but we're scared and we don't know. And so when you finally do, and the thing I want to get across to people is that even if you're happy in your job and things are going really good, it's never too early to start thinking about this, because it does take some time. So thank you for sharing. One of the cool things I like about talking about the hero's journey is that Hollywood picked this up. So right now, all movies that you watch are based on the hero's journey. And George Lucas was actually one of really big fans. So I got any Star Wars fans out here? Come on. Yeah. I love Star Wars. I'm a big Star Wars fan, and so we're going to take a look at a couple clips here. And this is, like in my book, I write that each of the stages, I pick out a movie and say, okay, this is an example of this character in this movie and whatever stage they're in. So it's kind of fun to do that. So I thought we'd look at this clip of Luke Skywalker in his ordinary world this is the beginning of the story. He's on this desert planet. You know, he's working for his aunt and uncle, and he's fixing droids or whatever, but he knows there's more out there for him, right? He knows that he's calling to fight for the resistance, become a Jedi Knight. So let's watch this clip. Doesn't he look so young? Isn't that's so crazy? And the music is, I just love the crescendo. And so, you know, if you know the story now, you realize that was his calling. I mean, he's looking at the twin sons or whatever he's doing, and he, in his mind, he's like, I want to be significant. There's something more for me out there. All right, so we'll move forward to now. Luke is in his journey, right? So he's realized he's got to become a Jedi Knight, and he goes on training, and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda get a hold of him, right? And so he's training to become a Jedi Knight, and Yoda's like, Luke, you have to face your fear. And so watch this next scene, one of my favorites. I like Yoda's there. Yoda's like, I don't know what he's thinking. He's like disappointed, or I don't know what he's thinking there. But it's like, okay, well, this guy doesn't get it. So, what is Luke afraid of? Anybody? From that clip, what's his biggest fear? Anybody remember from the story? Well, so yeah, go ahead.
They never say in the movie what his fear was.
Well, they do eventually. If you watch like the whole breadth of the movies and you kind of piece them together. So he's afraid of becoming evil like his father, Darth Vader, and that's his biggest fear. And so Yoda asked him to go into this cave, and it's kind of like a dream-like kind of quality in there, but he's got to face his fear, and that was it. So after facing that and realizing that he could become his father, I mean, the whole movie, all the movies really have that theme that run through it. So anyways, I think that's kind of fun to look at this. Hopefully you'll never watch a movie the same way, especially if you look at all the 12 stages of the hero's journey. You'll be watching movies for that. And hopefully you're going to go home and start binging Star Wars, if you haven't watched them all. I mean, I know that just hearing the music, I'm like, I got to go do that. So again, ask the question is, what does this have to do with finding your purpose? Well, again, taking the hero's journey, finding your purpose is about facing your fear. And we all have our fears and we get stuck. And so as we go through that process, we learn what we're good at, what we're not good at. We learn what we like, what we don't like. And this is the beginning of following your bliss and finding your purpose. So, I'm just curious, is anybody taken their hero's journey? And have you looked for your bliss and looked for your purpose? And actually, there's no better time. If you're in transition, this is a really good time to start to look at your purpose, right? Because if you don't, you're going to be right back here probably in a year or two if you don't really find out what excites you. And the universe doesn't like that. I mean, basically, if you keep refusing the call, the universe is going to come knock you on your butt. And the more you refuse, the harder the universe comes until you accept the call. All right, so We've got a little exercise in front of you here. This is a small portion of a much larger exercise about getting you to think about finding your purpose. So I was wondering if you guys just pick a question. There's only a couple questions there, or if you kind of know it, you can put it in the summary. Just write down a couple thoughts. Need a pen?
Please.
I'm sure we have one. I got one here. And then if somebody wants to share, you can share. So we'll take a couple minutes here, just kind of go through it. So it looks like people are kind of wrapping up here. Anybody, you can keep writing or whatever, but if anybody's got one, just pick a question or whatever. If anybody would like to share, just be interesting to kind of see what people are thinking.
Well, I've already spoken, so I'm going to quiet somebody else. Unless nobody else speaks, then I will.
All right. Anybody got anything?
Well, what makes me misty-eyed is when I see somebody finally realizing that they have a voice and begin to use it.
That's right. And that's, you've kind of obviously done some of this work and have found what really turns you on and helping people do that. And Michael helps people write books and a host of other things, but that's awesome. Anybody? All right, go ahead. You got it. Yeah.
I had to do something, a week or so ago, that I think was significant. Just like Luke Skywalker, when he was talking to Obi-Wan, I'm not going there. I'm not going to Los Ices or whatever. I got to get home. I didn't for it. And it said that, most of my younger years, I'm very good at engineering, mechanical stuff. Legos. Give me a box of Legos, you can leave me alone for hours.
Nice.
But I feel that this time in my life, I'm being called to leave behind all that engineering stuff that somebody else built, the hammer and all that stuff, and get into the work that God's calling me to do. And I just felt that in my heart. I boxed up all my Legos, every building I ever built, and some of them are tall as me, and I gave them all to my grandson's school. And it's that part of that stepping out.
Yeah, it's part of it, and it's that sort of ceremony of kind of boxing them up. And then what's cool is you gave them away, so you're helping other people, which is always part of this. In some way, we're wired that way, right? We're wired that when we do things for other people, we just feel really good, and that's what's interesting. And I love how science and spirituality connect. And when Joseph Campbell talks about this and that you got to find your bliss and what that means. It means a lot of things to a lot of people. But so for you, so what inspires and motivates you? So you have this calling, and so now you're motivated to talk to other people, help them sort of on their journey. Is that right?
If I had an hour, I could tell you that the life I came from was horrible. But now I've received healing and strength and everything, and now I really enjoy helping people find freedom and healing for where they've come from. And I wrote down passion to spaghetti. When I was a kid, we were dirt poor. I often went to bed hungry, but I loved it when we had spaghetti because it's cheap and it fills you out.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a friend a while ago, and they said, Mike, you cook spaghetti way too many times. But you know what? If there's a group of people that are hungry, chances are really good they're going to get a pot of spaghetti.
It's going to fill them up.
Yeah.
I love that.
So.
And that's actually, so in back to the hero's journey, in this 12 stages, the 12th stage is the return. And the hero's journey is always pictured as a circle, because as you kind of go through your journey, you come back home, and then when you're done with that journey, you start another one. And the last stage is telling your story to people so that you can convince them or help them take their journey. So it's mentorship. And it's, again, why the hero's journey was so fascinating, because it hit all these sort of areas that I didn't really think of, but But and then watch movies, and you'll see that, you know, that you got to come back to the village to bring the treasure back to the village, and or, you know, tell the people, you know, the story. Awesome. Anybody else want to share? Awesome. All right. So now that you've had a chance to kind of think about this a little bit, if you want to get some inspiration, I just did a quick YouTube search. Awesome, tons of videos. I'm sure everybody's seen them, but if you just do Finding Your Life Purpose in Life or Finding Your Life Purpose, great videos out there. I encourage you to check that out. I love quotes, so if you do Best of Life Purpose quotes, there's a lot of it out there. And I know that it comes up a lot in people's Facebook and different things, but if you're intentional and you kind of seek it out, it kind of takes on a whole nother area. So, you know, now that you've kind of had a taste of and an idea of purpose, if you have or haven't thought about this before, it's sort of time to take action, right? Because, as I mentioned before, not only is it good to look at now if you're in transition, but it's probably going to take a while for you to, you know, figure this out. And you probably have some things you're going to have to work on and change, you know, so you need to be open to personal development and change. And that's part of the journey for sure, and it's part of finding your life purpose, because it's not easy, but great things aren't easy, right? So I encourage you to take your journey and follow your bliss, find your purpose, and make sure your ladder's up against the right wall. All right, so before we just kind of open it up for questions or whatever, everybody take out your phones. Good, they're already out. This is one of those presentations where instead of I say putting them away, I say take them out. And so I want to give you a chance to get a copy of, I've got a 23-page Finding Your Purpose guide, The Hero's Journey. And it's got a lot more questions about finding your purpose in here, but it's also got the whole Hero's Journey exercise, so you can kind of put your life into the 12 stages. And so I also want to put you into a drawing to get a signed hard copy of my book. And so if you just text the word Hero Life to this short code 31996, so the number you're going to text to is the 31996, and the little message is Hero Life, no spaces. And it'll give you a little welcome message, and it'll ask you to put your email address in there, and immediately you'll be sent out a copy of that guide. It'll be in your email box when you get home. So thanks. Let's have some more questions or ideas or thoughts.
There was a book that I read recently, and it kind of resonated with this, where the opening, kind of one of the opening lines was, you know, guy meets another guy on a subway, whatever, and, you know, hey, how you doing today? And, you know, the guy responds back, you know, is this a museum day? And he talks about how, you know, if you think of your life as a museum, and you're the curator, and if you had a video and a log of your entire life, and you were going to show somebody else that, how would you go through life? You know, whether it's if you had a bad day and, you know, you yelled at some driver because they cut you off, or, you know, how would your museum, how would your life look? And it, you know, they talk about the purpose, you know, purpose for life, PFE, and talk about different things on, you know, how do you want, you know, your life to be, you know, when you show somebody that.
That's interesting. That's sort of another take on, you know, at the end of your life, you know, what do you want people to say about you? And, you know, it's kind of the same thing about the ladder. So there's lots of metaphors out there. And I love metaphor because it just kind of gets you to think a little bit different and kind of get out of your normal world. But, you know, it's important. Yeah. Any other questions, thoughts? All right. Well, gosh, look at that. I thought, well, there's no way, how are we going to get through this whole thing? And we got plenty of time. So I'll be around. I've got a couple copies of my book. Make sure you get in there, because whoever texts in there, I'll just pick a random winner and I'll let people know. Yeah.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I'm working with someone who, part of what I do is, part-time life is helping people who are in career transition, getting prepared, tools, etc. So I'm working with a person who thought that he would be at his current job for retirement, 4 years away. He's been there close to 40 years, and now is likely going to find himself in a job that he really doesn't want, and therefore he's absolutely said he doesn't want the job that's been offered to him. He's shared with me that he doesn't like change, which, okay.
None of us really do.
Yeah, I know, actually he does. And also he shared with me that he is really struggling with, what do I go do now? I mean, that company has been his world for almost 40 years. And he just bought a computer, so we're making strides. So I'm very proud of, you have an email address, an email account, and you've got a computer and all that. So,
right.
But as you think about his life, tips for his life journey. So as I'm trying to help him think about new opportunities, new kinds of jobs, how he takes his current skill set and applies it differently, guidance.
So
he's in this huge life transition.
Absolutely. And so what I'd say is I think what's really good about transition and the work that you guys do that work here in the Career Source Center is there's a lot of logistics that have to get done. Getting a computer, learning how to interview, especially if you're not familiar with computer skills today, that's a big challenge. So those are some logistics that he clearly has to do. But the part that people don't think about as much is that other part. It's sort of this part. It's that purpose, it's that passion of what do I really like to do. So one of the things I would just sort of encourage to ask him some of these questions, and get him thinking about it. That's the first thing. My guess is he probably never thought about that. He's got this sort of steady job. He's just like, he's been there. I'm going to be there till I retire. So what do I have to figure out my purpose for? Now, hopefully he has, because like I said, it doesn't have to be a profession, but life gets so juicy when you've got something that gets you out of bed that maybe it's your job, but it's something else too on the side. And so I think the biggest thing probably is to just start putting that little idea into his brain a little bit about let's look at what gets you excited, some things that, will create some passion in for you, and that you're going to, help him with the logistics, and that's important. But when he goes home, let's start thinking about this. So I think that's really the thing and it's what I want to sort of get across is that, especially if you're in job transition or if you've been in the same thing, just start. Because like I said, he's probably not going to have an answer right away. But if he thinks about it and you kind of guide him on that and ask him a few of these questions, he's probably going to look at something that's like, what is this all about? What is this? But if you can kind of talk to him about it, now that it's not about writing a novel or doing anything. Just think about some of this stuff. Yeah, that's cool. Thanks. Awesome. Well, I don't know if I mentioned, but I was an engineer too, and I think it's interesting when you're searching, and like I said, it's just because I knew that there was something more out there, and I didn't know what. And I tried a bunch of different things, and I was like you, I was in the ACA doing internet marketing, a couple years ago, and it just wasn't really filling me up. And when I wrote the book, I was in the middle of writing the book, and that's when I realized I have a degree in psychology, so I thought, well, maybe I'll go back, get my master's, and go, kind of do therapy to work with people, because I was having this calling to kind of working with people somehow, and I wanted to use my skills. And so I love to do video, I love to write, I love to do a lot of different things, so I started kind of doing that, but it just wasn't filling me up as much. So I kind of came across, kind of by accident, life coaching, and it just hit that kind of sweet spot. And it's just funny, I was just talking with Kristen before the meeting. When you get this passion, when you find the bliss, you follow your bliss, and you kind of in your purpose, and I know that you're feeling this, is doors start opening up. It's just like any sort of law of attraction, manifest, is that what you think on will happen, right? What you spend your time thinking on will be there. But I think there's this spark too when you're following your passion and your purpose. There's a spark to it. So I think the two things that are key there are, one, helping other people. That's just a spark that will get you to something else, to really be able to define that. And doors are opening up. I've never really been around just kind of story since we got time here. I've never really been around the addicted community, and a friend of mine, well, so I talked with Kristen, and I was kind of like, I'm doing this life coaching, and my typical client is people that are, kind of semi-successful or successful, but they're stuck, they're not sure, they want to go to the next level or something. And I started thinking about, well, maybe people in job transition, maybe that'd be an area I could look in and kind of help people kind of figure out that next step. And so we started talking, and she told me about what Goodwill does, and I didn't realize, all this cool stuff that Goodwill does. And then the very next week, I had a friend who connected me. She read my book, and she said, oh, this is really cool. I want to connect you with a friend of mine, Bobby Joe Reed, who runs the Healing House, which is an addiction recovery center. And I said, okay, that sounds good. I don't know. And I'm kind of just following my calling, my passion. This is hitting in there somewhere. I don't know where it's going to lead. And so I said, okay. And so I call her and I say, hey, I'd love to give you a copy of my book and come down and, take a look. And so I go down there, and it's part of the city I've never been in before. I'm Johnson County bubble guy. And so I'm get in my car and drive down there. And she's running late. So her assistant, Mackenzie, greets me and starts talking to me. And it worked out really good because she gave me a whole tour of the facility and kind of really talked to me about the nitty-gritty stuff. And Bobby Joe's, the founder and the leader of this thing, and she's got people, coming at her all the way. So when she finally got there, it's hard to get like her focused attention, but it worked out great. So that was interesting, as again, I just sort of was following kind of my bliss and my purpose. I didn't know what it was going to turn out to be. So literally 2 days go by, and my friend who connected me calls me and says, hey, I have this friend, and I think she's an alcoholic, and she's kind of admitting it now. She's never really admitted it to me. Do you want to work with her? And I thought, well, okay, yeah. I was sort of like, I'm saying yes, but alcoholic, I wasn't really sure. We're not really trained as life coaches to deal with, these kind of some of these serious issues. But I thought, okay, well, I'll talk to her. Well, before I can even call her, this person calls me, and she's drunk and crying, and just, it's crazy. And I realized pretty quickly, I kind of talk her down a little bit. And I realized that she needs professional help, definitely. It doesn't need a life coach at this point. So I talked to her and I said, well, let's meet Saturday. And then I talked to my friend. I said, look, she needs really professional help. And my friend knew about Healing House. I'm like, she needs to go to the Healing House. So she got a couple of her other friends, and we kind of had this little intervention. And it was so cool that I had just been there 2 days ago and could really talk about Healing House and know that this place would totally take care of her. And she was scared. Totally scared and everything, but she's like, okay, and she had this group of friends around. I've never been involved in anything like this, but it's a great story and it's funny, I didn't plan to say this, but after talking about this, following this bliss, that's exactly what that is. And it was such a cool thing to be part of this sort of intervention and watch this. So my friend actually got her to go, took her down to Healing House. Well, she was too drunk to be admitted. And they had this 28-day detox center, but they wouldn't admit her, and I'm not sure if it's a legal thing that she has to sign something or what. So my friend took her to the emergency room at Shawnee Mission, and they couldn't get a bed or whatever, but apparently they did get her in there, and she went through a couple days of detox, so hopefully she's getting to go to the Healing House today, and we'll get checked in. So just kind of a little story about that, and so I'm hoping that something kind of works out that I can work with recovering addicts, and kind of once they've gone through and they've got that part where they're sober and they're clean and they keep them busy, then I can come along and maybe work with them a little bit to find their purpose, that passion, that spark, because most people at that point completely lost it, right? And so like I told this friend of ours now that went in, I said, go to this Healing House, get sober, and then I'll come alongside you and find that power that you used to have that you lost. But anyways, interesting story. Yeah.
Can you take your screens back to that 12? And can we take
Yeah.
a picture of that?
Yeah. And if you text this in here, it's in that document, but let's go back. You can certainly take a picture of it. Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of I kind of pared this thing down because I had this graphic that sort of talks about, because there's actually, you see how it's kind of split into 3 phases? There's actually 3 phases of the hero's journey across these 12 stages, and I just totally geek out on this stuff. It can get kind of in there, but it's a lot of fun, and it really does help people understand their life sort of at this global level when you kind of put yourself into these 12 stages. And like I said, you can watch Star Wars and like, yeah, I was just like that. But yeah, if you anyway, this graphic is in there too, in that handout that you'll get in your email. All right, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.